Good evening, everyone. If you're just coming in, please do come and grab a seat. Sam, Justin, would love it if you could grab a seat or continue your conversation. Great. Well, welcome everyone to the third and final session of the dating course. Can't believe we're here, third session. I'm pretty sad to say that it's our final one, but just a big thank you again for the last two sessions and just what great conversations we've been having. We've been so impressed and just really chuffed with how conversations have been going, how open and honest everyone's been, and then conversations following on in the pub. And just to say that we're going to go over again to the White Horse after tonight as like the after party. So we'd love it if you could all join us and just continue the conversation. I know we've talked a lot about this course not being the sort of fix-all, but the sort of opening up of an honest conversation around dating, normalizing dating, and then hopefully taking that into normal life, and whether it's our church here at St. Dee's or whether it's your church. So tonight we're going to be looking at how I know my date has a future. But we're also super lucky. We've got a special guest this evening. There she is over there. So we've got our very own Lauren Windle. Let's give her a round of applause. Woo! In a second. So Lauren comes to this church. She's an author. She's a speaker. She wrote a book it came out this year, this summer. Bless her. Lots of sort of COVID changes for her launch, etc. But her book, Notes on Love, is out now. And she's got a discount code, which hopefully you've got from the email that Will sent out earlier on today. And she's going to be around after this session. She's going to come over to the pub with us as well. So do grab her, chat to her, ask her all the questions that you've got for her. And just in a second, Will's going to actually do a short interview with her. So you'll obviously get to know a bit of her story from there. But we're just going to pray to start this evening, and then I'll invite Will and Lauren up. Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for this course. Thank you for Will. Thank you for all the wisdom that he's put into the preparation and then shared with us. Holy Spirit, we invite you here, we welcome you here, and we thank you that we get to learn tonight, and we pray that what we learn here we'll be able to take out into our church and our community. In Jesus' name, amen. So let's welcome up Lauren and Will. Let's give them a round of applause. Hi, Lauren. So good to see you. Yeah. Oh, that's yeah. Do you want this one? There you go.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great to see you, everyone, and everyone on the recording who can't make it tonight. I hope you enjoy catching up on this one in your front room. Lauren, it's so good to see you. Thanks so much for coming in
It's so nice to be
tonight.
here.
And this is a wonderful book. It's so wonderful. I think there might be did I write in this? I think I might have done.
Yes.
Something really nice.
Will wrote something really nice.
I think you've hidden it in the sort of back
No,
square.
I'm pretty sure it's in the front page. It was something like far better than my books. Would highly recommend.
Yeah, it is actually. It says amazing, much better than any of my books. Definitely buy it.
Oh, hang on. Wait, where's the? I want to prove that I do actually have it in here.
No, let's see a look.
Oh, it's fine.
It's
right.
front page.
He was lying. It's there. It's front page. Yeah.
I'm gonna wave this around because it's a brilliant book. How on earth did you end up getting involved in writing a book about dating, Lauren?
Yeah, I don't know really, because as you know, my focus has always been on addiction. But I felt like we all just kept having these conversations that were really funny, really interesting, really God-centered, and not very sort of cringy, but everything that was out there in the media surrounding dating was quite cringy and wasn't very funny. And yeah, it was God-centered, but it just didn't reflect a lot of the chats that I felt like I was certainly having. So I thought it'd be good to get something down that was a bit more relatable, maybe.
And you certainly did that, because you were a journalist before working for a number of newspapers.
Yes, yeah.
And so you
The
already
tabloids that shall not be named.
We won't mention the tabloids, but obviously you're very funny and naturally funny, and so there's a lot of good humour in this book, which I loved.
Oh, thanks.
When you did your research, what was the sort of weirdest, like, or the sort of most unusual thing you felt? You know, when you did research, maybe we shouldn't go down the weirdest, but
Because we prepped for this, and he told me most surprising. And I do know what the most surprising thing is. The weirdest is that someone once went on a first date, trod in dog poo on the way, and then sat like this without realising. And then when they got up to go to the toilet, their date said, "Why is there poo on your palm?" So that was the weirdest story I heard.
That's a bad start.
Most surprising thing from the research is something that I'm not sure, but I think you do say on this course, and that is that women in particular felt that when they dated outside of the church, they were treated better. And I was really upset and surprised by that. And I think some men agree with that as well, just in that they have maybe found the environment less pressurized, fewer expectations, and things like that. But the idea that women felt more respected in a framework where God wasn't involved, there's something fundamentally wrong with that, isn't there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then in the book itself, which chapter would you say best, if you like, manifests or encapsulates your dating manifesto, the sort of, the heart of your message?
I think probably I want to say like the last one, because it's kind of the conclusion where I sum up and draw from all of the other chapters, but that's quite a boring answer, isn't it? But at the very end, I end with a prayer where I sort of talk about what I hope people will take on board off the back of the book. And it's things like, like, I hope that you compromise. I can't remember it, but it's something like, I hope that you compromise on, height. Because why is everyone suddenly so obsessed with the height of their partner? Like, no one even thought about it 10 years ago, and suddenly if he's shorter than 6 foot, it's outrageous. I don't know what has happened. And like their job and but that you don't compromise on feeling a genuine connection and being able to have great conversations and sharing your faith and all of those kind of things. And I think actually we've just gotten things skewed, and we often expect love or a partner to come in a certain package with a certain job, and all of those things are so insignificant compared to their heart and the way they interact with you and the level of respect they show you. And this whole like nice guys finish last thing, I think, is absolutely ridiculous. If you aren't in a place where you can accept someone treating you, in an emotionally available and open way, then step away and work out why you can't enjoy that brilliant attention. It's ridiculous to think that you're like, looking for a bad boy or girl. Like actually what we want is to be treated really well and to be really open to people who are open to us.
Amen. That is absolute wisdom right there.
Thanks.
If you were going to...
That's from the man who runs the dating course, guys. So
hope that doesn't turn into a meme later on.
I really hope it does.
If you were going to encourage this crowd of amazing people to take next steps beyond the course, aside from reading the book, which I really pray they do, what would you encourage them
Available
to do?
in all good bookshops. I think if I could encourage you guys to do one thing after this, it's to ask them out. Whoever it is, whoever the first person who came into your head when I said that was, you know who that is. Go and ask them out. Don't pretend it's just for a coffee or just a chat or whatever. Say the word date. Just say, I'd love to spend some time with you on a date. And I don't know where you stand on this. I don't think that just has to be men who make that step. I think it's lovely for men to make that step, and it really takes the heat off us. But actually women can do that as well. And I think that just approaching someone, being really clear about what you'd like, is not embarrassing. It's not awkward. There's nothing wrong with it. It's incredibly flattering. And everyone here would be so respectful and pleased if they were asked a question like that. So assume that your question will be taken in the same way, and just be open to like asking people for a coffee more, I think. And it's fine if it doesn't go anywhere. Don't plan what your name will be like if you take his, or, you know, would you even like to live where his parents live or her parents, you know, whatever. Like, it just doesn't, it's just a coffee. Just see how you guys get on, see if you connect. And if it's just friendship, then great, you've got a new friend.
Amazing. Lauren, let's give her a massive round of applause. Lauren Riddle. Thank you so much. Laura, could you just reset the camera for me? Otherwise, they're going to be staring at the chairs for the next couple of hours. As I say, I sent you all a link for this book, and I really do recommend it. I don't just recommend every book that I get sent to read, so I don't put my name on things I don't really believe in. And I really do think this is a fantastic book, and it's written by a fantastic person. So do have a look at that. It's so important as well to support Christian authors, because it's not an easy place to be, but a lot goes into writing a book like that. So I want to encourage you in that. It's great to have you here tonight, and I'm pumped about what we've got going on in terms of our session. And let's try and go for a quick review. Last week we covered a lot of ground about the dating equation. Hopefully you'll never look at a candle the same way again. And you know, you're always like, oh yeah, look, there's the romance inside and the wick, and there's the connection on the outside. That's the conversation, and you kind of got that idea in your head. And the dating equation, which is, you know, slightly brutal, but actually gives you something to frame relationships with and say, actually, what would this look like? Is it just burnout through having lots of attraction and nothing else? Is it a bit of a drip because I've just got lots of connection but nothing else? Or is there a bit of a spark? And there's also a conversation around it. So hopefully last week, you know, you've got some frameworks to work with, quite a lot of acrostics to think about. These obviously in themselves cannot resolve a dating crisis, but what they can do is enable you to measure some amorphous experiences on a little bit more of a concrete scale. And there's a lot about dating which is very, very unclear. So if you at least have some sort of framework to qualify in your own mind whether there's attraction and connection, what the trajectory looks like, you can actually make some more informed decisions. But ultimately, remember, we are trying to leave the people we date better off, having spent time with us, and we're trying to date in a different way to the way in which the world works. And that means dating with a compassionate heart, always seeking to love and respect the other. And I don't think there's ever been a point in history where I felt that's more important. I've been so saddened by recent events and was horrified by what I read today about Sarah Everard. And I just think something is wrong with our world when men treat women in the way that they do. And it makes me sad and sick. And I think we need more teaching around love, gentleness, kindness, respect, and honor in order that we love one another well in Jesus' image. So let's lean into that as a primacy away from tonight. I wanted to help you move on from last week with a few other factoids. This one is that it takes 7 hours of dating to attain emotional bonding. Now, remember, don't go to the pub and say, I'd like to have some emotional bonding with you, please, because that won't work. But it's surprising that 7 cumulative hours are required for you to cross the bridge from a date which means not that much to you to a date that starts meaning something significant to you. And if you feel like you're on a perpetual cycle of going to Starbucks in your gym kit on a Saturday morning to meet another guy or another girl who is lovely and everything, but you just don't feel anything for, could it be that you're just doing 45 minutes of something when you actually need to do 7 cumulative hours of it in order to feel anything? Imagine, it's like ice fishing. Imagine, I like fishing. It's not hard to imagine. I go fishing on the ice, and I take all my fishing kit, and I lumber out onto the ice, and I start digging a hole, and I say I'm going to dig for half an hour, and I dig half an hour's worth of hole, but actually there's too much ice there, so I pack up my kit and go home again. Now, am I ever going to catch a fish? What if it takes 7 hours to dig a hole through the ice so I can finally put my line in the water and catch the fish that I'm looking for? Jam, sit still. I wanted to do that, so she's a school teacher, so I just do that. She's sitting at the back like naughty person, so just making some noise, you know. The key thing is, like, imagine it takes 7 cumulative hours of time with someone to start feeling something for that person. And what I want to challenge is this
immediate idea, which I think is a Hollywoodization of what romance really looks like. So we've all watched too much of Sleepless in Seattle. You know, when you kind of eyes across the room and it's like, oh my goodness, that's the person for me, a deep sort of heartfelt sense of draw to that person. And it's like, yes, this is the person. And you have that one margarita and you're wildly in love, and that's the end of the story. It's a lovely story that fits within an hour and 40-minute film, but it just doesn't fit within normal life. That actually you have to have enough time with a person to begin to feel something for a person. And if you think about it just akin to friendship, how many friends have you made for life in 5 minutes? Then the friendships that you make have been built over time, and there's a minimum amount of time that has to be spent before you feel the depth of friendship. You can make friends in a moment, but the depth of friendship is what's significant here. You can find a connection with someone in a moment, but a depth of relationship to emotional bonding takes time. So I kind of want to help you to think about persisting for a time to get to a place where actually you start to feel something. Now, there's definitely, as we're going to go on to say, a point at which you have to make a decision about whether anything's actually there. But if you don't go for it over a longer period of time than you expect, I can promise you that you won't find it. And the challenge is, particularly for Christians, they're so loaded not to hurt the other person that they want to bail before they could possibly get anywhere near the 7 cumulative hours. So they're like, well, they're quite good looking, but, you know, not lighting the whole world up. And, you know, they're quite nice, but they are a bit into chess, which is a bit boring, and I'm not sure about that. And we don't really connect on food because he likes Italian, I like Chinese. I just think it's not going to go anywhere, so I'm going to bail. You know, so like, you're talking yourself out of it before you've realized that they said they liked chess, which was a bit of a mistake because they wanted to look intelligent, but they don't really like chess. But they thought you might like chess because you look a bit like a librarian. And so they said that, and then they regretted it, and then they started learning chess online in case you tested them out. And that's actually the reason you're not going to date them, when actually that was the reason that they were trying to hook you in, so you kind of missed it. And I just want to encourage you to say, actually, I'm willing to spend a bit more time to find out what this might look like. And it's just so interesting because it's just so much time. And I think if we have a cheap approach to what dating looks like, we would be cheated from the dating arena. But if we have an investing approach, remember, then we're going to find something that's really great. And some of us in a relationship also misbalanced. You know, some of us will go in and we'll feel a lot, and the partner won't necessarily feel that much. That doesn't mean they won't go on to feel a lot, but people kind of set at different emotional rhythms. I meet couples who often say, oh, he was really keen, but I was really not sure. That's quite difficult. But I stuck with it, and then actually it suddenly emerged. And I was like, oh, no, actually, I really like this, or I'm really into this. So go for longer than you think. Everyone needs a little bit of relationship scaffolding at first. You know, when you start off, it is going to be clunky. If you're going to build something, you never build just with the bricks you're building with. You create a superstructure around what you're building, and then you try and build in order that the structure stays up when you take the scaffolding down. But scaffolding around your relationship means actually recognizing that an early fledgling relationship requires a little bit of support and flexibility. So Louie's quite into gardening. She's always trying to grow something, especially she likes creeping plants and, clematises and things like that. And they always look absolutely wincy at the start, and I'm kind of looking at them, I'm looking at the kids and the dog, and I'm thinking, it's not going to last long. But then she stakes it out, lots of stakes, like a little prison around this fledgling plant, and sort of like, stay back. I'm like wired up, and then, and then gradually this thing will emerge, and then it will take root, and then it will take hold of the fence, and then it's off. You need to look at a new relationship and ask yourself what it needs to protect it, not how early you can test it. And Christians are great, again, at testing things. They think that's a real biblical mandate. I'm going to test it. I'm going to lay my fleece out before the Lord. Remember, Gideon wasn't really celebrated for doing that. That wasn't like a great thing to do. It didn't say you put the Lord your God to the test. It was like, that was kind of default for a bad situation. But you're not meant to see whether the new fledgling relationship will snap easily if you bend it hard. So putting the relationship under tons and tons of pressure within the first few encounters to see whether it's really a good thing doesn't actually make for growth. Therefore, you can't actually know whether it's a good thing. And you have to choose a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of compromise, and maybe a little bit of uncertainty through those first 7 hours in order that something good might grow. And only at a later stage can you say, okay, I don't think we need that anymore. Or I think we can have the more raw conversation about the fact I don't actually like chess, or whatever it is that I've humoured this for a while in order that a relationship might develop. But now it's time to kind of strip away the scaffolding and actually see what we've really got. But don't do it too soon. So, how do we know whether your relationship has a future? The first question I need to ask you is, when do you ask the question, how do you know your relationship has a future? At which point? And I'd love you just to buzz in groups for a minute and be as honest as you possibly can with the people around you about when you start asking this question. So you'd be quite surprised. Try and tell the people around you, if you've not been in a relationship before, just have to kind of guess on when you think you might. But if you've been in relationships before, you might say, I started asking that question at this point, and see what people around you say. So just a few minutes, chat to the people around you, introduce yourself. When do you start asking this question? Okay, let's come back together. Can I have a show of hands? So we'll start out there. After 10 dates, who would start asking, does the relationship have a future? Who said 10 dates? Who said five after 5 dates? They'd start asking the question, one sensible person here. Who after 2 dates would start asking, has their relationship got a future? Who after the first date would ask, has their relationship got a future? When is everyone asking when their relationship has got a future? Let's have some feedback from the floor. I've miscalculated. Yes, at the front, Fiona. Ooh. Okay. You're reframing my question. That's very sneaky. Yes. What constitutes a relationship? We could talk about that. We'll have to have a 4th session defining that. Come on, some other feedback. When would you start asking, does this relationship have a future? Who makes a snap judgment, like a Malcolm Gladwell kind of blink test? Quite a few people. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So to a level, we have typically really preconceived ideas about whether the relationship is going to work or not before we've even begun a relationship. And many of us will prejudge a relationship, and many of us will judge a relationship within the first 7 minutes of encounter. So it's quite depressing. If you think it takes 7 hours of cumulative dating experience to create emotional bonding where you actually feel that you've got a relationship, just to be clear, but you judge a relationship on whether it's got a future after 7 minutes of encounter with a person. Some people say, within 15 seconds, I know whether I want to build a relationship with this person. So we tend to be very, very instinctual. And that's understandable given the culture we live in, but actually it's also quite counterproductive. Now, what I'm not saying is that you shouldn't trust your instincts to a level, but I'm also saying there are a lot of reasons why your instincts will fox you out because you're naturally defended. So ultimately, we all have natural internal defense against being wounded. Therefore, we're more likely to predict catastrophe than not. We have what's called a bias to the negative, which is an adaptive human phenomenon. We naturally assume that the other group which we don't belong to will be hostile to us. The reason we do that is in ancient human history. If we assumed that every group outside of our own group was going to welcome us in, we would wander in and then they would kind of sacrifice us on the altar of whatever they had going on, which was pretty miserable for us. So you'd assume that they were going to be hostile to you in order that you would sort of tiptoe around them, because then if you knew they were nice, then you could make friends later. But if you wandered in where angels fear to tread, then it would end up badly for you. Now, we have that same natural instinct where dating is concerned. So if you have a bias to the negative, you're already predicting this date isn't any good. So you're actually foxing yourself out when you've got no evidence to the contrary. So I want to sort of encourage you to be a bit skeptical about this particular question. But we're going to work out why we might be skeptical through a few different ideas. The first one is what we call relationship sabotage. So if you catastrophize a relationship, or if you yourself feel vulnerable, you're likely to sabotage your own relationship in a number of different ways. Now, people hate me saying this. There'll be people here who hate me saying this. Because you're like, right, now you're saying it's my fault that I'm single. So it's like, knives are out. Shing! I'm on the stage, you'll stay back, because it feels like, oh no, you're blaming me now. You're saying, like, it's on me. I'm not trying to say it's all on you. But what I am saying is that many of us will have sabotaged really potentially good relationships because of wounds or issues that are carried within us. And the different ways in which we sabotage relationships, sometimes they're so unconscious, we're not even aware that we're doing it. But if you think back to some of your relational history or non-relational history, you might have exited potentially very good rooms for no clear reason, and then found yourself doing a retrospective and thinking, why did I do that? Why did I leave? Or why didn't I follow that up? Or was that potentially something? And we can't kind of work out why. The first piece of self-sabotage is what we call toxic relationship reasoning. And this is what's called the expectation error. The guy on the right there is actually Justin Timberlake. The guy on the left is not Justin Timberlake. He's just a guy in the shower. But you can see how things went wrong when your expectations are for Justin Timberlake and then you just don't get quite Justin Timberlake. It feels disappointing. I mean, I think the other guy's good looking too, but you can see the challenge. Like, part of our toxic relationship reasoning, part of our relationship sabotage is that we have an error in our own expectations. So we've built up the story around what we're actually going to get to a point where it's unreachable. Everyone's really still feeling, please don't feel that sorry for the guy on the left, okay? He's just a Justin Timberlake lookalike. It's just coincidental, but it's still good for him because people will say, hey, you look like Justin Timberlake. I don't know where I got that from, but I've not seen the rest of the picture. I've only got that bit, just to be really clear. But we've all done it in our own heads, is that we are automatically let down because of what we believe we're going to find. And I don't want you to, if you like, lower your expectations unnaturally, but what I do want to do is encourage you to challenge your expectations. Because if your expectations are keeping you from a loving and healthy and fulfilling and joyful relationship, then your expectations are the problem. And many of us actually defend ourselves with unnatural expectations. So what we're saying is, I've not found anyone that I really like. What we might actually be saying is not really willing to risk being open to anyone because I fear being rejected. But by saying I haven't met anyone I really like, I feel legitimized in my self-defense. So I'm shielding myself against possibility because I've got an extremely rigid view of what I actually want. And many of us will know that what we want isn't actually reasonable. was great what Lauren said a bit earlier on about let's get over the height issue and whatever other issues there might be in our categorization. If you write a wish list for what you're really looking for and then show it to a friend, ask them, do you think this is reasonable? If they look at it and they're like, flip, this is like 3 pages long. Like, where do you find one of these unicorns? Then you'll know there's a problem. Okay, so there's something to work with expectations. The second one is something I mentioned last week. This is called toxic, this is the excitement fallacy. I spent a long time thinking about these words. I love words. This is the difference between being adrenalized and entering into what's called an oxytocin-based relationship. So I told you the story about the telephone that I put down on the girl who I really fancied in a big way. And there was a huge amount of adrenaline in that space. So you feel a huge amount of adrenaline. Now, when you do meet someone you really like and you begin the process of actually going on multiple dates with that person, you feel a huge amount of excitement. Actually, that excitement is part of your autonomic nervous system, and it's pumping you with adrenaline, and it's causing you to feel butterflies in your stomach and sweaty, embarrassing hands and feet and coldness and flushes and all sorts of different things. And that's what people call a sort of love feeling. What it is actually is a fear/excitement feeling, and it's produced by the release of the hormone adrenaline into your bloodstream. The trouble is, we psychologically experience something called habituation when we encounter something which stimulates our autonomic nervous system. Over time, the stimulation begins to reduce because we become normalized or habituated to the threat. And so something that was exciting and stimulating suddenly feels quite normal and slightly mundane. So when you first pick up the phone and it's that person that you've been waiting to call, you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you called. I'm so excited. But when you've been married to them for 10 years and you pick up the phone, you go, yeah, what do you want? I still love you, but what do you want? And then you put the phone back down again when you've dealt with the issue. Because it would be unnatural to feel totally giddy after you've met a person 10,000 times. And yet many of us in this transition between an adrenally based relationship into an oxytocin based relationship think that the fact we don't feel excited anymore means we don't fancy the person anymore. We're just like, oh, I used to feel excited about it, but it's kind of gone off. Now, if you haven't thrown a person out after the first date, the most likely point at which you'll end a relationship is at the 3-month mark. Interestingly, 3 months is the period of time it takes to habituate a threat into your normality. It's exactly the same correlation between the point at which you drop off the cliff of responding with adrenaline because you're just not excited anymore. Isn't that weird? Some of us here will think, oh, that's really interesting. I've ended 9 different relationships at exactly 3 months. And I felt exactly what you're describing, some strange sort of boredom and malaise, like I wasn't really into it anymore. Could it be that actually you were just adrenally responding? What's interesting is oxytocin, which is a much more subtle hormone, is the actual glue of a long-term relationship. And oxytocin is produced primarily in breastfeeding mothers and babies who are breastfeeding. Now, weirdly, as a dad of 3 children, when a baby appears, there's no process to that. When it appears, you don't immediately go, well, you kind of go, wow, a baby is here. This is great. And you kind of pick it up and it's like a bit awkward, but it's lovely and you kind of cuddle it and everything like that. But you don't automatically feel huge wave of love for your child because you've only just met it. So it's like you're excited, but it takes time. So when I coach new dads, I'm like, expect to fall in love with your child as they grow, and your feelings will strengthen over time. Normally, 6 months, you'll notice a change. As they begin to talk, you'll notice a change, and your relationship will deepen. Tell a new mum that, and it's like, it does not compute. Because in their body, there is already an automatic hormone that bonds them to the child and the child to the mum. So they don't need any coaching. Now, that oxytocin is what you go on to continue to produce in a loving marriage relationship. And actually, sex is a place which produces high levels of oxytocin, which is another reason why I believe sex is for marriage, because it actually keeps the attraction and keeps the connection alive in a very, very biological way. Isn't that amazing? It can also be why sex outside marriage can be quite painful, because you produce oxytocin in connection with a person who maybe doesn't have the same level of commitment to you as they might have, and as a result, you can feel very bereft emotionally when you're no longer with that person anymore. Obviously, there's risks to marriage too, but as a principal point, something biological is going on which has a significant impact on how you feel. And I think in the great mystery of the Lord, this is all part of the design. But just to help you not to bail too soon. The third one you all know about, it's the trapped trap, which is FOMO, which is, again, a real common phenomenon in the context of the church. And I don't want to completely harangue the guys, but this is often quite a guy issue in large charismatic churches that I've been part of. So there is a stream of beautiful Christian ladies walking through the door, and guys have a sort of a kind of one eye on the door, particularly the big churches I've been part of, where there's a slightly revolving door. Temptation is to have oh wow, there's new people coming in this week, there's new talent. And so there's a sort of feeling of like, I don't really sure I want to commit because actually someone else might come through the door that might be better. And now I might have a relationship with them instead. And so there's a kind of determined non-commitment for the sake of the fact that there might be something better. Now, we all are subject to this to a level. But what I can guarantee you is if you swap out one relationship for another, you'll never find the relationship you're looking for. You could cycle through 100 different potential partners for life, but if your attitude is always that there might be someone else who's better, you'll never get what you're looking for. And that commitment to let go of FOMO is something that goes on in marriage too. Ultimately, you only get joy through commitment. So you only get what you're looking for by investing in what you've already found. You cannot get it by looking somewhere else. And people who typically look somewhere else for something else haven't got the goods that they need to be able to invest in the relationship that you've got. So if you're dating someone and they keep looking over your shoulder at someone else, it's probably not a goer. But FOMO is a real enemy, and the more we social mediaize life, the more habitual it becomes to us to start looking for other things other than the thing that's right in front of us. Okay, so that's one to look out for. The fourth one is what I call the faith fail. And this is rare now, but maybe it's sad that it's rare now, but for Christians, this is not everyone, okay, so this is maybe a small group of people, but sometimes people fall in love with God super deep, and I hope that's all of us. You love God, you're like on fire for Jesus, and it's all good, and then you suddenly meet someone, and it's like you're suddenly in love with Sam, and Sam is amazing, and suddenly God doesn't sound so cool anymore, and you don't feel so excited about God anymore. So then you have this massive crisis where you think, I used to love God, but now I just love Sam. Love God, love Sam. Now, I used to love God, but now I love Sam. So the devil must have provided Sam in order that I'm distracted from my love for God. So I should leave this relationship with Sam and go back to just loving God. Now, that's maybe a little dramatic, but and maybe it's not that the devil's provided Sam, but it's certainly that Sam is a distraction to what I've really been called to, which is just to really be on fire for Jesus and just to really love God. So every so often I meet a Christian person who sabotaged their relationship with a potential partner who God has provided because they feel that they're somehow betraying God by falling in love with someone else. Now, that might sound a bit extreme, but sometimes on a light level that can happen to us. And all I'd say to you is that when God gives you love what God gives you. Actually, we love God through our partner in marriage. And it goes even for non-Christian partners. That actually, there's something about the way in which we honor marriage. It's a mechanism by which we give glory to God. So marriage, we could theologize marriage for a long time, is a manifestation of worship. And so when we show love to another, we also show love to God. So marriage becomes a vehicle for celebration and praise, which sounds a bit weird, but stay with me here. The key thing is that you're not compromising your love of God by falling in love with someone else. So don't sabotage your relationship with someone because you feel like it's drawing your attention away from God. Instead, focus on how well you can love the other person, and actually that will enable you to put your love onto God in a direct sense. So there are a few direct challenges or sabotage moments. And I'd love you again to just gather in groups and just with people around you, just share maybe some of those that you identify with, or if you want to generalize it, some of the ones you think are most common in the church setting. And we just take a 5-minute to chat with those around us, and then we'll come back together. Okay, we're going to press on just because time is slightly short tonight. There are other ways in which we can sabotage our relationships, so don't feel that that is an exhaustive list. It's certainly not an exhaustive list. I've just shown you a few examples of ways in which we can sabotage potentially good relationship. But the key thing here is not that you're necessarily holding yourself to account to these few slides, but you're questioning yourself to ask yourself whether you're trying to escape something good. So that's the key question here from sort of more of a coaching perspective. Are you trying to escape something by looking at things that seem to disqualify you from this relationship? And when you get into the habit of questioning yourself like that, you can then work out that actually this isn't something you want to pull away from, even though you feel an urgency to. So it's natural to feel offended, and it's natural to shy away from things that are potentially costly. It doesn't necessarily mean that we should shy away. In fact, sometimes that feeling should drive us towards deeper commitment. So it's an invitation for you to assess your own response to something that feels threatening but could be good. Equally, I don't want to leave it there tonight because I want to also help you to recognize a moment at which it's right to walk away. So imagine now we're moving on a little bit and we've done the 7 hours of cumulative dating relationship. And we've gone out on a number of dates, which we've enjoyed. We've had a lot of communication, which is good. And we're feeling actually that things are progressing, or we're feeling that actually we've invested a relatively significant amount in this relationship. But what's it look like to walk away? And when is it right to walk away? This seems like a key area. I've always believed that if the church could do breakups well, we wouldn't end up with this horrible carousel around all of these different churches as people move church to kind of get away from people that they've just broken up with. Because actually that's so detrimental. Why would you leave the church family that you're part of, that love you and know you, and your spiritual family, to go and date in another church where they don't know you, only to then leave that church and then join another church? And, you know, it's like playing leapfrog with something that's far too precious to do that in. So I want us to think, How could we date in a way that meant breaking up in our own church wouldn't be so catastrophic that we'd have to leave? That's really my key ambition here. So when is breaking up right to do? Well, the first one is to put some red lines in and absolute outs. You are precious children of God, and you should never be subject to abuse, just so we're absolutely clear. So that's physical abuse, emotional abuse, controlling or manipulative behavior, or mistrustful behavior. So just want to be really categorical about this, because sometimes people who particularly might have a low self-image or low self-esteem, or come from families where some of these abuses were evident, believe that somehow they're worthy of it or they should allow it because there's a lovely person there who just happens to get a bit wasted every so often and sort of lash out, or just every so often tells quite a lot of lies but doesn't really mean it. So one of the danger signs when we're in love with someone is that we can begin to make excuses for their behavior, and that can blind us to abuse. But I just want you all to just commit right now to saying those are always signs that I should leave a relationship, even if it's painful, okay? And one of the key things you should know is that you cannot help an abuser from within a relationship. And one of the things that many of the people I've counseled who've been abused in relationships believe is that they're the only person in the world who can actually help the person who's abusing them. And it couldn't be further from the truth. You cannot help that person. If they are caught in a cycle of abuse, you cannot help them. They need to receive help from outside of this relationship, and actually you're not in a safe position. It's also really important that you know that abuse typically scales. So if you're dating someone who is sometimes physically abusive, that isn't something that goes away in marriage or gets sort of ironed out or becomes less prevalent. It typically scales. That's also true for emotional abuse. So if someone slags you off or slates you or denigrates you in any way verbally, very often a person who's willing to do that verbally, that will then transmute into physical action or sexual action later. So the trajectory is not good. So I know that's a somber slide, and I'm normally quite frivolous, but I really want you all to just sort of see that and go, yeah, okay, I get that. This is really important as a baseline, that I'm aware that that is always a reason to leave relationship. How you leave often requires you to receive support from other people. And if you are in a situation like that, I'd love you to talk to me in confidence, after the session or on email, and we'll be able to help you to extricate yourself from a situation like that. Please don't try and do that on your own without seeking support first. But when is it right to walk away in a more casual way? Let's assume that that isn't our circumstance. There are other times, hopefully the vast majority of times, when things aren't as clear-cut as that. What might it look like to walk away? And I call this spliticate. It's the etiquette of breaking up. I think there's a way of doing it really well, which is still painful. And I'm not going to pretend for a minute that breaking up is not painful. It's always going to be painful for one partner or another. But the first thing is to go back to our commitment for honesty and compassion. It's honest but kind. So a way to break up with someone is not to say, I'm just going to be really honest with you. I just find you really, really unattractive. Because ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to leave someone with less than they started with. You're denigrating someone. And many of us will say things, I'm just being honest, but that's nearly always weaponizing our honesty. So honest but kind is expressing that, look, I really like you, but I just don't feel there's enough attraction there to keep me in this relationship. That's not saying that there isn't any attraction, and it's not saying that you are unattractive. It's saying I'm just not feeling a level of attraction to you that makes me believe that I could pursue this relationship further. So that's honest because it's attraction orientated, but it's also kind because it gives the person some latitude to interpret what I'm saying. So your honesty is really significant. I haven't put ghosting on here, but I've already mentioned ghosting. Ghosting is horrific emotionally because it leaves us believing that inner critic, that negative bias, and will always tell us something that's far worse than the reality of what we've really experienced. And that's why honesty is so helpful and healing, because as the person on the receiving end, you can make sense of your situation without it becoming your worst inner critic's assessment of what you did wrong. A safe place and a good time is really important because, again, we talked earlier about how timing in dates say something. So if you take someone to an Italian restaurant at 8 o'clock, that says, I really fancy you and I really want this to go pretty quick. Whereas if you go to Starbucks on a Saturday morning in your gym kit, you're saying, I'm really not sure about this, and I'm just about to go off to the gym if I haven't already been there again, because I want to get away from it as quickly as possible. So a safe place for breaking up is not in this person's apartment at 11:30 at night after you've been to the opera, okay? Because there's a massive mismatch between their expectations and the reality that they're about to experience. And the less surprise a person has in a breakup, the more accommodating it is to their heart. So if you phone up and say, look, I can't make it tonight, but I do want to meet you tomorrow because I think we need to have a conversation, that is a kind of slightly dread-laden premeditation of something that's going to be a difficult conversation. So you're actually preparing someone kindly for an encounter which they're likely to be prepared for in themselves. They're going to go, okay, all right, let's talk. And then you're meeting the next day at 10 o'clock and you're saying, actually, look, I want to have a proper conversation. And a safe place might be a public space. So if you're nervous about a breakup in terms of what might be said or the level of emotion, doing it in a public space can make it a safe breakup. So again, obviously not wanting to sort of necessarily taint that with an abuse-laden outlook, but if someone could be very angry or very, very emotional, being in a public place can be a safety net for you so it doesn't become sort of a very out-of-hand or over-emotional encounter. Reflective, not blaming, is really important. The whole "it's not you, it's me" adage is tired and useless without it being very, very defined. But reflective is, look, we've been out on 7 or 8 dates and we've had some fun together, but my feeling is that there's fun and laughter, but I'm not feeling a sense of connection where I kind of feel like our characters align. I certainly don't feel like our values are the same or that I really want to invest in this relationship for that reason. So you're reflecting on it, but you're not saying, your values are basically completely crap and you're really shallow and I laugh at your jokes, but that's all there is here. So you're not putting it all on them, but what you're doing is you're reflecting on the relationship that's been and helping them to understand your reasoning. And I say face-to-face because I would just encourage you never to dump someone by text or email or even a letter. There's courage and growth that takes place when we look in someone else's eyes and give them bad news. And it's actually something that you won't regret. I think everyone today appreciates an honest, reflective conversation where they feel that they've got closure, again, which is why ghosting is so bad, because you don't know where you are. But that face-to-face conversation is really significant. Again, if you feel like it could be unsafe, I think it would be possible to do it on a FaceTime style call, so you're actually seeing each other's face. But if you can do it in person, face-to-face, I don't think you'll regret it in the majority of cases. So there's a few outlines. I'm sure there might be some questions or responses or something that you feel I've missed or you'd like to challenge on that. Is there anyone? Yes, Lauren, go on. Okay, yeah, it did sound a bit harsh when it came out of my mouth. I was thinking the same. I think maybe we need to have the heavy chat is probably a little too strong, as Lauren's pointed out. But I think that cancellation can sometimes be helpful because it's like, actually, I don't really want to go on that mini break with you right now. And I'd love to meet you just for a coffee tomorrow morning. To then have a sort of neutral space to have a more honest conversation is probably a good thing. Probably best not to send someone to sleep with, we're going to have a really heavy breakup conversation tomorrow, because you're going to get that that's going to kind of premeditate it. But you see what I mean about priming it a little bit and not doing it. Someone very dear to me was taken on holiday by a boyfriend, which was probably unwise at the time anyway. But he dumped her at the train station on arrival, put her on a train, and she ended up coming on holiday with me and Louis for a week, which we didn't expect. But it was like, why would you do that to someone? Why would you dump someone when they've travelled 400 miles on a train to meet you for a week, and then you dump them at the railway station? Oh, I I just thought it'd be better to do it face to face. At that point, no, it's definitely, phone me up, do a FaceTime. I had another friend who was dumped in South Africa, who again was supposed to be on a nice trip. And was sort of like, oh, well, you're here now. Oh, well, actually, I don't really want to carry this relationship on. Oh, great. I'll just travel around South Africa on my own then. Thanks. It's that kind of thing. It's just totally foolish and out of keeping with the thing. So just thoughtful on that. It's really important. Boundaries, not bargains. This is important because sometimes you'll be with someone who's quite emotionally needy or potentially quite manipulative, and they'll talk you out of the breakup. They'll be like, I just want you to give it another 3 months, and I just really love you, don't do this to me, and it's all kind of overwhelming, and then it becomes look, I'll do this if you stay together, I'll do that if you stay together, and then you kind of feel like it's sort of wheedled out of you to kind of carry on. And I always say, look, you just need to hold your boundary and say, look, if you feel convinced that this isn't the right thing, you need to say, look, I feel really strongly that I don't want to be in this relationship anymore, and so I want to hold this boundary. And I'm not saying we can't have a conversation, but I need some space to think things through, and I definitely want this relationship to end today. So hold your line and don't let yourself be overwhelmed. Never spiritualize. God never said that you should break up with this person. Because if you do that, what you do is you actually damage someone's relationship with God. So another friend was dumped by someone whose mentor had told them that God had told them not to be in this relationship. So it was even worse. It was like, how can I distance myself from blame for dumping you? I'll blame my mentor, and then I'll blame God through my mentor. And somehow God sort of got the blame at the end of the day. So if you let God take the responsibility for the breakup, you've broken someone's heart and then made God the culpable for that breakup. And that means they don't just lose you, but they also lose God, because they're furious that God might have said this. And no, God never has. So, and even if he did, you would protect the person faith-wise and say, look, I've made a decision to end this relationship. The reasoning is mine. It's not on God. So never ever spiritualize. And agree a recovery phase. I would tell you this, you cannot be best friends with someone who you've been in a really serious romantic relationship with. That is just standard. So don't end a relationship by saying, oh, we can still be friends. We'll call each other every night and say hi and it'll be great. Don't worry, I'm not going to be leaving your life, because you're offering something that you can't keep. Actually, you can't be friends. And I always say to couples who are still really good friends, get together. You thought I was going to say get a room, didn't you? I was just toying with you. No, because you're actually, if you're still that close, you should, you've got a relationship going on. But you cannot be genuinely balanced friends if actually one of you doesn't feel it in the relationship. And then an agreed recovery phase can look like, look, I think we need at least a month of no communication. Or, look, I don't want you to leave the church, but I'm going to leave our life group, for example, just for a month, just to give each other a little bit of space. You cannot just keep ripping the plaster off a wound. And so saying, look, let's work out what works without being catastrophic can really help. And it, again, shows compassion and kindness. We need to give each other some space in order that we can heal. So there's a few pointers about splitting. What about, let's up the tempo. What about staying? What's it look like to stay? How do you know a relationship is worth keeping? Well, the first one is that you're seeking to grow in love and trust. So it's I'm getting this. Wow, this person, they are unfolding, and I'm finding more and more things that I'm just attracted to, that I just feel this is magic. One of the things I found in marriage so surprising is I keep finding stuff out about Lou, about her temperament and about her character, that surprises me and makes me feel oh man, that's amazing. Now, it seems weird, I'm really unobservant after 20 years of being together. I'm wow, haven't you noticed that already? No, that's new to me. But chatting to older couples who've been married for a really long time, they still have this sense of discovery about their relationship. And you maybe have older couples who have that sort of sense of wonder. And it's not exciting to anyone else, But to you as a couple, it feels like, oh, wow, that's really amazing. That's really cool. The second one is taking time to listen and understand. So communication is key. Like in the marriage course, we teach on effectively communication. We have like 5 sessions. Communication has a whole session on its own, and a couple who communicate typically stay together. Poor communication is the number one reason for relationship breakdown. Obviously, you hear about finances, but again, it's communication around finances the problem. You hear about sex, again, it's communication around sex that's typically the problem. You know, you hear about adultery, it's often post poor communication, that kind of thing happens. So communication is the essence of a good relationship. And so when you find yourself enjoying talking and understanding one another, that is an enriching and growth-based relationship. I've said alive in faith and fellowship. I'm cautious about this one just because I don't want to disqualify people who are with someone who maybe isn't spiritually in quite the same place as them. People always say, oh, you know, what do you think about relationships with non-Christians? You know, I always say, you've got to live the story that you're in. And actually, you know, it's always our best ambition that you might be with someone who shares your faith. But if you're living in a story right now with someone who doesn't have a faith, the right answer isn't necessarily to terminate that relationship, but to actually live in that relationship, the story that you're already living in, and see how it develops. Now, alive in faith and fellowship is for you. Are you alive in faith and fellowship? So it's not about qualifying the faith and fellowship of your partner, but does your partner enable you to be alive in faith and fellowship? And that's the key thing. Because some people's relationships will dry and drag them out, and other people's relationships will build and fill them. So think about that for you. And finally, are you becoming authentically you? Which is a bit of a kind of fluffy, kind of slightly zen-y statement, which I probably should clarify a little bit. But I think it's about recognizing that in relationships we carry some pretense. It's exhausting if your relationship forces you to continually play a part. But it's releasing if you are able to relieve and reveal more and more of yourself over time. So what should happen is, on date 1, you've kind of gone to like Tony and Guy and had your hair done and you smell amazing. But after like date 10, you can turn up with greasy hair and just wear tracky bees, and that's totally fine. What shouldn't happen is every time you go on your date, you feel the pressure to kind of become this thing. Because actually that's not how you can live. Of course, everyone wants to make the best of themselves for their partner, but you have to believe that you can be absolutely you and it's totally fine without pretense. So it's a trajectory towards normal you, not to shiny, spangly, amazing, special you that only comes out on dates. Let's have a little buzz again, just with the people around us, about stay. What do you think about that as a acrostic? And is anything missing for you when it comes to sticking it out? What do you think? Have a chat for just a few minutes. We've just got a couple more slides, and then we're going to have some Q&A. Okay, let's come back together. Final time. Anything that you think might be missing? There's one thing that I think I always like to drill out, someone will mention. Anything that you think, anything else you think, oh, what about this? Yes, Johnny. Yeah. 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 Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So, that's a good question. So, I grew up in a culture which was very much, if you're a Christian, you only date Christians. So it's do not be unequally yoked to non-believer. I totally understand that. Biblically, it absolutely represents marriage because there wasn't any dating options. So you effectively, the yoke was the yoke of marriage, and they were seeking to marry. Marriage was, if you like, from within the community of faith, but also because of the patriarchal nature of first century Christianity, was that effectively the male character would effectively discern the spiritual journey of the people in the group, the family group. So you see that, me and my family will serve the Lord. So it's like a patriarchal statement of faith. So if the husband happens to say, I've become a Christian, being unequally yoked to a non-believer is not really a thing, because you just be like, right, you're a believer. Oh, am I? Yeah, because you're in my family, so this is what we're going to do. So it's slightly different to our contemporary culture, where actually we're making faith decisions for ourselves in the first instance. If you're going to say to me, Will, what's your gold standard? I would absolutely say, if you're a single person, I would love you to go after someone who shares your faith. That is, for me, a primacy issue. Obviously, I'm a Christian priest. If I was married to someone who didn't believe what I believe, that would be a serious problem. But I've also seen it worked out in people's lives personally, that if you're in love with Jesus and you marry someone else, there are all sorts of massive costs associated with being married to someone who doesn't share your faith. That's not to say you can't be in a happy marriage with someone who doesn't share your faith, but they have to be a certain sort of person. And it's very hard on the outset for them to know what they're taking on. This is the key thing. Christians always think, oh, well, you're blessed to have me. But actually, for non-Christians, there's a massive cost associated with having you. And sometimes Christians undersell that cost to their non-Christian partner. Oh, like my faith, it's kind of quiet, and I just go to church once a week. Then you get married and you're like, I'm out 4 nights a week at different church meetings, and like every Sunday you won't see me for dust, and I'll sing worship songs in the bath, and all sorts of stuff that actually they just don't want to be doing. But you've underplayed it. And I think I'm always cautious, Johnny, because I've met so many people who've become Christians through relationship with a Christian. It feels unfair for me to say, categorically, God can't work in that situation. My brother-in-law is a really full-on follower of Jesus, and he was not a Christian when my sister started dating him. But now if you go around his house, my sister's house, he will be the one doing the Bible studies. And he's the one who's leading, he's on fire for God. And I love that about him. And I can't criticize my sister because of the decisions she made, because I kind of feel God is part of the story that unfolded there. But I also know an awful lot of people who've entered into that story and haven't had an outcome as happy as that one. So I think we all have to take personal responsibility before the Lord about the decisions we're making. But I'm not a fan of the kind of, now I'm in it, I'm in love, I'm doing a retrospective on the decisions I've made, so therefore I'm going to terminate this relationship out of hand because I've suddenly had a crisis of, oh my goodness, I've fallen in love with a non-Christian. Because that also isn't productive, and I think you have to be very prayerful and cautious about response in that setting. But there are costs. There are costs to marriage, whether you marry a Christian or a non-Christian, but there are very specific costs to marrying a non-Christian over the long haul. And this is a teaching that's extremely hard for women. So I would confidently say, Johnny, don't marry a non-Christian. I could challenge you with that personally, and I know that would be relatively straightforward, I hope, for you to manage. Because if I said the same thing to women in the room, it would be a lot harder for them to manage. because of the challenge of the lack of men in the church. And again, I want to be pastorally sensitive to the women in the church to say, you know, you have got a tougher situation that you're part of. And I understand some of the decisions that some Christian women make relating to this topic, and I don't want to condemn it. You know, I want to sort of empathise and understand. So a little pastoral discernment. Sorry, that's quite a long answer to quite a hard question. And I've got a few more. We're free for some questions, and so yeah, I'd love to respond. Hi. Great. Yeah. 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 You keep bowling, exactly. Yeah, yeah. You can keep on bowling. So, thank you so much for sharing that. I think in terms of our, staying, I think when you're first in, your activity becomes, is almost less important. But as you mentioned, there's some real key pinch points in long-term relationships. And normally years 1 and 2 are hard. Some people's, in marriage particularly, the first year is easy for some people and hard for others. And the year 2 is hard and the first year was easy. So everyone has a difficult year within the first 2 years. And then we have what we call the 7-year itch, where people have often got small children and high pressure. And then there's often a phase around year 14 and 15 with teenage children who are less dependent and knit the family together less. And then you have this big pool of couples whose children have left home who then divorce. And then we've got a whole silver surfer dating world at the moment. And what's just been described there is the key for shared interest. And, that it takes more than love, if you like, to keep people in deep connection and to enable great conversation. And so, I love sports that my wife doesn't particularly love. I've got to be honest. Like, I love surfing and I love fishing. She doesn't like wetsuits and she couldn't care about fish unless she's eating it. So, we don't have hobbies in common on that level. But what we do every day is walk the dog together and have lots and lots of conversations. So the dog is a vehicle for conversation. And you want to make sure that there's always a vehicle for conversation in your relationship. And most couples, I always recommend, if you're dating someone long term, find something that neither of you are proficient in, but both of you could enjoy, which, it might be concerts or gigs or festivals or whatever it is, but get excited about something together, basically, because that creates a great basis for discourse. Got space for a couple more, Laura? Thank you. That's a really great question. I'm not sure if I said it when I talked about the dating practice, but you might go out in company. I think I might have mentioned it. Go, if you're not sure, inviting someone out on a date with a group, for example, to the cinema and saying, we're going, I'm going to the pictures with a group of friends. Do you want to come? That sounds really old then, in the pictures. Yeah. So come along to the pictures with me and my friends. It can be helpful if you're not sure, because you've got the safety of the group and also you've got friends to offer an opinion. There is a danger in friendship groups, and I've seen this worked out. Sometimes there can be jealousy, and sometimes people can actually sabotage your relationship because they actually want their single friend to still be single. So if we're really honest, we can give bad advice to friends we really love because, hey, they've got this really hot guy who's really into them, and we're not going to see them for dust for the next 6 months if they really get going. So it's like, I don't know, I think he was making eyes at someone else in the cinema. you know. And suddenly it's like, oh my goodness, yeah. Oh no, he doesn't look trustworthy at all. No. I saw him take some money out of your bag. You know, and before you know it, it's all over. So I think we need to be a little bit cautious, because friends who love us can also be a little bit selfish with us. And I also think that it can be quite unnatural if we're spending tons of time within a group setting, because you just can't have the sort of rootsy conversations you need to have to know whether or not you really connect together. We've all probably been out on dates in sort of fraternal way. It's really good fun because everyone's kind of partnered up and you're dancing and it all feels great. But actually, is it the person you're really enjoying, or is it the sense of company that you're really enjoying? And that's quite hard to discern in that setting. At the end of the day, you have to find yourself, you know, in an airport lounge with a delay, bored witless with this person, in a bad state, feeling grumpy to know whether or not it's got real legs. Lou and I we were leading a group with the Crusaders to an orphanage in Africa, which we weren't really, I mean, we were sort of barely together really, and we were just sort of been dating for a little while in quite a kind of cautious way. And we were on this horrific trip, which I was leading. Everyone got amoebic dysentery, which is not a good deal. We were in an AIDS orphanage in the middle of the bush, sleeping on 3 racked kind of tiered bunk beds, being attacked by armies of ants. We literally had to leave our shack because a whole ant colony walked through it, which was fine with the ants, but then it dispelled all of the bugs and critters that you wouldn't normally see from the walls. So it was like tarantula world. And everything went wrong on this trip. We actually get medevaced out. It was that bad. But I remember painting Pluto on the side of the wall in this AIDS orphanage with Lou. We stank. I mean, it was hideous. And I just remember thinking, I could marry this girl. You know, I thought, wow, if we can laugh in this situation, we can definitely do life together. And actually, we had our first conversation about marriage in that AIDS orphanage, which is pretty remarkable. But it's an illustration not to wow you, hopefully, just to give you a sort of feeling of like, it's in those gritty moments that you really get a revelation of whether or not your characters can align. And you have to have that pinch point really to say, yeah, okay, hard yards, this can work. Space for one. Yeah, Steve. Yeah. 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 I mean, look, Steve, the friend zone thing, like there are guys and girls out there who are brilliant at being kind and affable and fun, and they kind of accommodate, and unfortunately they get known for being great friends. And actually they are great friends, but they've got aspiration for something else. And the danger is, of course, that you're always just about on the precipice, but never quite into the void. And there is a need to take a slightly different approach. Lauren rightly said that the whole nice guy comes last kind of thing is absolute rubbish. But the nice guy has to be the nice guy with a bit of grit. So grit is a key element. It's a hard in psychological terms, grit is quite hard to articulate. But grit is a sort of expression of inner strength and edge, which shows your defined edge of character. And the friend zone, almost by its very nature, determines that you don't show your grit. So you kind of flex and accommodate. And so, for example, if someone's showing, if a girl you're talking to is sharing quite strong opinions about something that you think opposite to, rather than saying, oh, that's really interesting, I completely disagree with you, which is grit, you flex it out and go, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, wow, what a great opinion. Oh, that's really fascinating. So what you do is you flex in order that their opinion fills the space. Now, if you don't lean back and demonstrate your edge, then you miss the attractional piece. And the attractional piece is, actually, I've got my own thoughts and opinions on this, and I've got my own character, and you'll see it in a level of frisson conflict with me. And so my encouragement is to kind of allow your personality full expression and think about expressing with grit. Now, with grit, you get a counter response, which is, wow, Steve was a bit off tonight, or Steve was a bit edgy. But actually, weirdly, if you talk to someone in an attractional situation, I found it quite attractive, because actually I felt they were quite forthright, or I felt I quite like their kickback. Who quite likes a bit of kickback? Yeah, thank you, Lauren. This is, grit is the confidence not to flex. It's not to say, it's not about unkindness, it's the confidence to show your edge. And it's often the thing that makes people very distinctly attractive. So I'd express grit, but I'd also do what Lauren suggested, which is say, you know, I find you attractive, I'd love to take you out on a date. And then see what the response is. But not to be embarrassed if it's a no. Say, well, you know, it was worth an ask. Fair enough. Yeah, sorry. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my personal view, I think I said in week 2, is I love women. I love a female ask. I have a very sort of balanced view on this. I don't have a very traditional view. And I believe in empowered women who should say, you know, I find you attractive, I'd like to take you out on a date. I think great. I understand that some women feel very much like, actually, that's not the way it should work, and I think it's an issue of preference. I would push, but I've got to be very careful here, but I would encourage women who feel that traditional view to make sure that their love of tradition doesn't stop them getting what they really want. So there is a danger, and again, don't throw cabbages at me right now, but there is a danger that if we love tradition so much that we're hanging on for that lovely, nice guy to come and ask us out, that we might miss what we're really hoping for. So you might want to say, I love tradition and I'd love to be asked, but I'm not going to be shy in the asking if it means I get what I ultimately want. And you can always kick the boyfriend up the backside at a later stage and say, so why did I have to ask you out? You know, why didn't you step up? And that might be an interesting conversation to have. But normally it's like, oh, I thought you were totally out of my league and I never thought you would have said yes. And then you're like, oh, really? Oh, that's amazing. Oh, you said just the right thing. Incredible. So there's a way of spinning it back, guys, just in case you feel on the back foot. You've been such a laugh. I've enjoyed myself anyway these last couple of weeks, so thank you. Where here from next? Well, I'm going to hand back to Laura in a minute, but there's obviously a chance for some feedback. But we're going to head over to the pub and Laura's going to talk to you about that. I'm always aware that I'm dropping you off a cliff. Like, we've done 3 sessions together. And it feels, I always feel really sad, like, guys, go on, let's do some more. I'll make up some more material. Come on, keep coming back. But I know that this is the right length of the thing. But so just from my point of view, thank you for being here. And it's been really fun. And I hope that some of the things I've said might be helpful and stirred you to some helpful next steps. So I'm going to hand back to Laura, and I think then we're going to head out.
Thanks, Will. Amazing, thank you, Will. Yeah, so just to sum up, if you've not been at all 3 sessions, hopefully you've had the links which you've been able to look back at, and I'd really encourage you to go back over those and watch them again. So we looked in the first session at us becoming date ready, so thinking about how we can become the people who the people we're looking for are looking for. So what are we bringing to the table, and maybe what's stopping us becoming that person. So that was the first session. Second session was what constitutes a good date. So we looked at the acronym for date, timings, practical things, but also what we're bringing on that actual date in terms of our expectations. And then obviously today, thinking about whether our date has got a future. We talked a lot after the first session about journaling and talking to trusted people about what we've thought, or the questions that we might have had. I said after the first session that I had loads of questions. I still have loads of questions, and I'm sure you guys do too. So please do ask. You've got Will's email, and if you're in our church, obviously you'll see him every Sunday. And you know, there's loads of people here that you might know, you might have made new friends. Please do ask each other, talk and carry on the conversation. That's so important that we don't just leave it here. So we're going to go over to the pub, the White Horse, just out here on the left. We'd love all of you, if you can, to come along. But also, if you're part of our church or not part of our church, we're also going to go to the pub after our Sunday service this Sunday, so after our 5 p.m. So please do come along if you're at a different church. But you want to come and sort of carry on these conversations, you're so welcome. Our service will finish around 6:15. And another opportunity, if you'd like to come along, is Sunday the 10th of October. We've got a Space to Live toolkit session that Will's running on persistent guilt. It sounds quite heavy, but it's looking at if you're struggling with maybe some guilt that might be underlying, or you might have had for a while, how to deal with that and how to get freedom. So that's 11:15 on Sunday the 10th. It's an open invite, so come along, maybe grab lunch afterwards. We'd love to see you. And finally, just to say, it sounds really lame, but because of GDPR, we cannot give out any of your contact details, and we wouldn't, so we're not going to be sharing any contact details between anyone. So if you do want to share your details with anyone here tonight, please do that before you leave, or before you leave the pub, because we can't do that for you. So if you want to stay connected, then do feel free to share your details. Thanks again for being so brilliant and being here. We've loved having you. And let's just give Will another round of applause.